He stood in the middle of the courtroom, pacing back and forth, eyes locked on the judge as though daring her to challenge him. His voice rose, defiant, sharp, and chaotic. "I don't recognize your jurisdiction," he shouted, ignoring the rules of order, ignoring the gravity of what was at stake. The courtroom sat frozen, stunned by the sheer spectacle. The man on trial was not just any defendant. He was Darrell Brooks, accused of one of the most horrific acts in recent American history, driving his SUV through a Christmas parade, killing 6 and injuring dozens more. Yet here he was, representing himself, transforming his trial into a circus. And with every outburst, every refusal to play by the rules, the weight of the tragedy outside those walls loomed larger. This is the story of the Waukesha parade attack, the chaos of the Darrell Brooks trial, and the long road to justice for a community shattered by violence. But how did it come to this? How did a quiet holiday celebration in a small Midwestern town turn into a nightmare that no one would ever forget? It began in Waukesha, Wisconsin, a picturesque community just outside Milwaukee, known for its quiet neighborhoods and festive spirit. On November 21, 2021, the town gathered for its annual Christmas parade. Families lined the streets, children clutched candy canes, high school bands marched with pride, and the sound of laughter mixed with music in the crisp evening air. It was supposed to be a night of joy, a tradition that symbolized togetherness. But then everything changed. Without warning, a red Ford Escape barreled through the parade route. Witnesses remember the horror. He just kept going. "He didn't stop," one person cried. The SUV plowed into marching bands, dance groups, and spectators, leaving devastation in its wake. Screams filled the air. Children were thrown to the ground, and parents desperately searched for loved ones. In the chaos, 6 people were killed, including children and elderly parade-goers, and more than 60 others were injured. The holiday cheer had transformed into a scene of blood and terror. The driver fled, but it didn't take long for police to track him down. His name was Darrell Brooks, a 39-year-old man with a long criminal record. Assault, domestic violence, weapons charges. His rap sheet was extensive. And just weeks before the parade, he had been released on bail for another violent incident. That decision would later fuel outrage across the nation. How could someone with such a history be free to wreak havoc again? From the moment Brooks was arrested, the evidence mounted. Surveillance footage captured the red SUV tearing through the parade. Dozens of witnesses testified to what they saw. Injured survivors described the terror of that night. And perhaps most damning of all, police body cam and dash cam videos showed Brooks moments after the attack. Breathless, confused, and desperate to escape. But as the case moved to trial, something unusual happened. Darrell Brooks made the decision to fire his attorneys and represent himself. What followed was one of the most chaotic trials in recent history. From day one, Brooks challenged the authority of the court. He interrupted proceedings constantly, questioning the judge's jurisdiction. He demanded irrelevant arguments, filed incoherent motions, and cross-examined witnesses in a way that left families reeling with grief and anger. At times, he refused to wear a shirt in court. At others, he glared at the judge with a smirk, or yelled so loudly he had to be removed to another room. The trial, which should have been about justice for victims, became a daily performance of defiance. The presiding judge, Jennifer Dorow, remained composed but firm. Time after time, she reminded him of the rules. "Mr. Brooks, you will be held in contempt if you continue," she warned. But Brooks persisted, turning every moment into a personal battle against authority. The prosecution, meanwhile, laid out a mountain of evidence. Videos from the parade, eyewitness testimony, the SUV's black box data, proving Brooks accelerated instead of braking. Victims took the stand, recounting their injuries and the lives lost. One after another, parents spoke through tears, describing children struck by the vehicle, lives forever altered. And still, Brooks refused to admit guilt. He insisted the tragedy was not intentional, that the jury should see him as misunderstood. He claimed he was a victim of circumstance, that no one could prove he intended to kill. But the evidence was undeniable. The law was clear. First-degree intentional homicide requires proving intent. And in this case, prosecutors argued, intent could be inferred by actions. When a man drives through barricades, accelerates into a crowd, and does not stop, The conclusion is inescapable. It was not an accident. It was deliberate. The trial dragged on for weeks, with Brooks' antics often overshadowing the testimony. At times, he was escorted out of the courtroom, forced to watch from another room where his microphone could be muted. Yet every time he returned, the chaos began again. For families already traumatized, the experience was agonizing. Finally, after weeks of spectacle, the case came to its conclusion. The prosecution rested, the defense had no credible evidence, and the jury was left to deliberate. As the verdicts were read, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 76 counts, including 6 counts of first-degree intentional homicide. Darrell Brooks lowered his head as the words filled the room. Families wept. Some cried in relief, others in anger. The judge's voice was steady as she announced the final sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom, once filled with Brooks' noise and defiance, was now heavy with finality. Justice at last had been delivered, but for the families of those lost, there was no closure, only the knowledge that the man responsible would never again walk free. The Waukesha parade attack remains one of the darkest chapters in the town's history. 6 innocent people lost their lives: Jane Coolidge, Tamara Durand, Leanna Owen, Wilhelm Hospel, and 8-year-old Jackson Sparks, among others remembered with love and grief. Dozens more carry scars, both physical and emotional, that will never fully heal. And so the trial of Darrell Brooks was more than a legal proceeding. It was a battle between chaos and order, between defiance and accountability. In the end, the court reaffirmed what the community already knew. Actions have consequences, and justice, though delayed, must prevail. But even now, questions linger. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Should Brooks have ever been free on bail? And how should the justice system handle defendants who turn trials into spectacles of disruption? What do you think? Was justice truly served in the case of Darrell Brooks? Or did the system fail long before the trial began? Because at its core, this story is not just about one man's crime. It is about a community's resilience, the pursuit of accountability, and the haunting truth that, in the blink of an eye, joy can turn to terror and celebration to mourning.